eKaren is at it again. Not content with trying to push for age screening for accessing YouTube or TikTok or social media, she's now pushing for age assurance mechanisms for using search engines. I kid you not, search engines. It appears there's no limit that eKaren won't go to. As usual, eKaren seems to be claiming that this is just for the safety of our children. A weasel word that just seems to be thrown around whenever they want to exert more control. And the reaction has not been particularly good. Campbell Newman, for example, states, brought to you by our own imported control freak, the e-safety commissar. So now we're all to be age checked to use Google. What a complete and utter disgrace. One can only hope that the US administration will force a backdown on this draconian and dystopian law. So it seems like we've come to the situation where we're hoping for President Trump to intervene to save us from our own bureaucrats. It's honestly a little bit ridiculous. It would be so absurd you'd think it couldn't be true, but unfortunately it is. So let's dig into it, and of course you can let me know your thoughts about eKaren's latest attempt for control in the comments below. Now, in a prior video, I have talked about her push for age screening on YouTube, and this is something YouTube has pushed back against, and I'll circle back around to that later on in this video. But at the moment, what I want to focus on is the age assurance for using search engines. It's something that in particular the Australian Computer Society has reported on, and they referred to the new rules that were published by the E-Safety Commissioner, aka eKaren. The Australian Computer Society states, Australians using search engines while logged into accounts from the likes of Google and Microsoft will have their age checked by the end of 2025 under a new online safety code, co-developed by technology companies and registered by the E-Safety Commissioner. Search engines operating in Australia will need to implement age assurance technologies for logged-in users in no later than 6 months, under new rules published on Monday. So what exactly do those age assurance rules involve? Well, there's really two parts of it. Firstly, what does the social media company do to verify age? And then secondly, if the person is found to be too young, what are the implications of that? So to the first one, it appears that social media companies will effectively need to search through, screen, and trawl any private information when you are logged into their account. So for example, say you're logged into Gmail and you're using Google. Well, in that case, Google is going to need to look through all of your Gmail to come up with an idea about how old you are, similar with any other Google services you might be logged into. Now, for many people, probably that will default to them being over 18, quite possibly because they've had an account with them for many, many, many years, so almost by default, Google is going to infer that they are over 18 years old. But nevertheless, it effectively tells Google, you need to go through, trawl, screen, and analyze all of this person's information. Now that, to my mind, is a monumental breach of privacy, in large part because it's not just Google doing this to sell you random crap, which they are doing at the moment. You log onto Gmail and you see all manner of advertisements. Rather, it is the government doing this. And I think that's even worse. The government getting your data, or at least telling someone else to screen your data, which is what's happening here, is significantly worse than someone using your data to sell you stuff that you don't really need. Now clearly, Gmail or Google or Alphabet using all of your data in nefarious ways, as we've seen in the past, is not good. However, it is also not good for the government to procure them to do so. So here, it is effectively forcing these companies to screen people for their age. But it sets a precedent of the government saying to service providers, well, why don't you just screen this person for other things? Maybe you could screen them for whether the beliefs are dangerous in some way, in which case send them down a rabbit hole. For example, let's think about a hypothetical situation, because the E-Safety Commissioner, or eKaren, or Julie Inman-Grant, has stated that the First Amendment doesn't apply in Australia, so therefore this is not far-fetched or fanciful. Say, for example, Australia were to bring in a treaty, for example, and you were not particularly fond of this. Could social media companies, or media companies more generally, be forced to trawl through your emails to determine whether or not to send you down a particular ideological path? Or phrased differently, the risk is that they'll get these companies to screen your data to determine whether or not you need to be propagandized by the government. And if you think that's far-fetched and fanciful, think about what would have happened during COVID if this were brought in during that time period. If, for example, someone had an unpopular opinion about various things during COVID, Could that person then be nudged via government edict to go down various different information sources? We see this with various warnings on YouTube videos already. It isn't a large step to force search engines to then manipulate results based on people's active behavior in their emails. For example, after all, the government is getting these search engines to look at people's email activity to determine how old they might be. It isn't a large leap to think they might go to the next step. Now, of course, at this point in time, it is just age assurance, something that can probably be done with relatively little intrusion. However, like I've said, it sets a precedent, and they're just going to salami slice away our privacy protections. Nevertheless, that moves me on to what are the implications of being found to be under, say, 18 years old. Well, in this case, effectively the search engines would default to being safe search, so blurring out potentially nefarious or untoward results. But the real question, as I've alluded to already, is at what cost does this come at? I mean, let's think of it this way. If there were no search engines whatsoever, well, everyone would be perfectly safe from this type of content, but of course there would be a significant downside cost. So, is it the case that blurring images, something that is actually going to be easy to circumvent, and I'll get to that in a second, is that worth violating everyone else's privacy? And that then leads me on to the circumvention of this. Well, the rules only apply if people are actually logged in while searching. So for example, if you're logged into your Gmail while you're searching on Google. But what about if you open up an incognito tab? Well, in that case, the rules do not apply. Think about that. It is so easy to circumvent that anyone, whether they're young or old, can just open up an incognito tab and search using the incognito tab. So what this means is that the government is trying to violate people's privacy for something that is incredibly easy to circumvent and that people probably would circumvent, and therefore we've got a big cost in terms of government intervention and the precedent being set, with, in my opinion, probably negligible gain given how porous the rules are. Now, of course, it is stated that these rules were developed in conjunction with the tech companies. But of course, the tech companies are effectively forced to the table. Now, I'm not necessarily defending the tech companies. They often do engage in nefarious activities. They clearly are using our data to sell us stuff, potentially selling our data in various other ways. However, they're probably here compelled to come to the table to come up with a solution. Whether or not you think that's a good excuse is really up to you. Now, I mentioned before that YouTube had balked at the idea of needing to engage in age verification. Well, indeed, YouTube has sent out an email to all content creators, or at least I've received it, so I assume it's gone out to other content creators as well, talking about the social media age restrictions for YouTube. The email states, "We are writing to you about a potential Australian government decision that would impact you, your channel, your audience, and the broader creator community. Last year, the government decided to exempt YouTube from its planned social media age ban, recognizing it as a unique video platform with quality learning and education content. We are concerned the government is now reconsidering their decision, following contradictory advice from the eSafety Commissioner and ignoring your voices and perspectives from the wider community. This could directly impact your channel. We're working to ensure the government understands the full impact on creators, parents, teachers, and millions of Australian youth if it decides to reverse the decision exempting YouTube. This could affect how your work is viewed and valued. The government's own research found that 85% of children and 69% of parents indicated YouTube was appropriate for those aged 15 years and under. Other third-party research found similar perspectives. The initial exemption reflected this. Changing course now would ignore this evidence and send a message that YouTube isn't safe for younger Australians. It would also push these younger viewers into a logged-out experience, where they lose access to age-appropriate experiences and digital well-being features. In essence, YouTube has sort of tried to push back, but whether or not that is effective, well, it's anyone's guess. After all, it appears that eKaren just likes to say, it's for your safety, or for our kids' safety. It's kind of like the "won't someone think of the children" phrase from The Simpsons, if you remember that far back. In my opinion, eKaren is just using safety as a cudgel, a weasel word, to strip away our protections and our free speech. But of course, you can let me know your opinions about what eKaren is doing here in the comments below. Do you support the decision to trawl through our data to try to verify information about us and the precedent it sets? Or do you think that maybe eKaren is going too far. Let me know what you think.